Beautiful. The music is so powerful. When we're speaking about the arts, the music is one of the primary carriers of the vibration of the arts. Now, let me know if all the translation is working fine. Everybody good? Okay, so I'll proceed. Okay, so obviously this weekend and the 2 weeks preceding it have been talking about the role of art in human consciousness and the expansion of human consciousness. Now, for many people, life just seems to be random, meaningless, and it's a great issue of our time. We see the rates of suicide increasing. We see people feeling abandoned, separated. A lot of difficulties come primarily because people do not have a sense of purpose in their lives. But there is, in fact, a deep purpose to all of creation. When God created the universe, He expanded outward, and like light, as light goes farther and farther out, it becomes dimmer and dimmer. As it comes back to its source, it becomes stronger and stronger. So that light going out to the farthest reaches is first of all in the minerals, and then in the plants, and in the animals, and finally human consciousness. But the whole purpose of life is the increase of self-awareness, the increase of consciousness, the increase of the expansion of the feeling and of the mind to include finally the reunion with God, who has created everything. And so if we're going to be as expansive as God wants us to be, we have to do those things which will lead to expansion. Now, the arts have long played an absolutely central role in human consciousness from the very earliest times. I mean, they find cave paintings with art on it from long, long ago, where they were down almost a mile underground, long tunnels, and still they find art on the wall. It's just an expression of human nature. But having said that, the purpose for humanity, the purpose for our existence, the reason that we're alive is to expand our consciousness. There's a particular kind of a transition point in that when we realize consciously that that's what life is about, and even more importantly, when we find a guide or a pathway that will help us expand our consciousness. And so I want to talk today more specifically, not just generally about art, but specifically about the purpose of Ananda art in the world. Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Master, starts his autobiography by saying the characteristic features of Indian culture have long been the search for eternal verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. So I want to paraphrase that. The characteristic features of Ananda art should be the search for eternal verities and the concomitant guru-disciple expression of creativity with attunement. And so for us particularly, we have this great path that has come to us, this great clarity. So much of the search for truth, it's like barely going through the foggy thoughts of humanity. But the true teachings of spirituality don't come from philosophers. They don't come from the mind of someone figuring things out. They come from direct experience. And so with our great gurus, with our great line of masters, it all comes from the direct experience of samadhi, the direct experience of union with God. And they are sent specifically to help lead us in that direction toward that great goal. So Ananda art should be done in attunement with this line of gurus. Now, there are many other kinds of art, just as there are many other kinds of spirituality. And God creates a huge variety, in creation. It's every atom, as Master said, is endowed with individuality. So, huge variety and creativity. But when it comes back to a particular path, there's many, many valid paths to find this expansive consciousness. But when it comes back to talking about Ananda art and our particular path, then these great masters have brought a particular kind of teaching to us. And so our art, if done correctly, Ananda art, should be somehow an expression of that teaching. Now, just recently in India, Devi and I were in India last year, and they presented us with a copy of a coffee table book with about 170 of my paintings in it. And it was a total surprise. You know, in the Ananda world, it's very hard to keep a secret like this. But we had no idea whatsoever. So when they presented it, it was a great surprise and a great joy. But the descriptions in it were quite generic. So what we've done over the past year is to take that book, arrange it differently, take some paintings out that were not very good, and put others in that maybe were a little bit better. And then, more importantly, to give descriptions. So we arranged it in different sections. I'll just show you quickly the sense of what this book looks like. And thanks to Nandini, this will be available next week here in Italy. They're just printing it. So, but I want to read from the introduction to this about the purpose of my art. Let's see. The purpose of my art. My art is an extension of the main role of my life, sharing the spiritual teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda, whom at Ananda we generally refer to as Master and Swamiji. Usually this is done verbally, through lectures, classes, and writings. My wife Devi and I are deeply engaged in this. In addition to several books, we have a weekly blog which has been going out since 2013, more than 500 blogs so far. We have also given countless classes and lectures. Words, however, either written or spoken, reach the mind first. They can, of course, awaken feelings in the heart, but that is generally a secondary aspect. The arts, music, painting, dance, and others reach the feelings first. Most of my paintings start with a feeling or vibration, one that comes to me in meditation. Sometimes the catalyst is a flow of energy I feel in the spine during a meditation. At other times, a particular color will come to me. Occasionally, it is a philosophical concept that I want to express visually. After receiving the original spark, I then meditate on how to visually express the energy, color, or concept. In many different ways, my life is dedicated to trying to build a bridge between the physical world and the energy or astral world, and my paintings reflect this. So I'll show some paintings and then describe, but that clearly states for me the purpose of my art. You know, I've been trying to convince Devi. I much prefer to paint than I do to write. So I've been trying to convince Devi that since a picture is worth 1,000 words, that this represents somewhere like 340 blogs, and that she should just write the next 340. So far, I haven't been able to convince her of that. But the more important point here is that the arts generally bypass the logical mind. At least that should be one of their purposes. There are many, many different art forms, but all of them have a way of often reaching the heart first. When we listen to the music, you know, here with Swamiji's music, we have not only the music, but he has a philosophical, his lyrics are philosophical teaching, and they're given. But in many cases, we just listen to the melody itself without the lyrics, without the song. And that melody itself conveys a vibration. And Swamiji was extremely careful in wanting to have his music be very pure in the expression of a vibration. So, as he said, he never wrote a single note that was insincere. He always felt first the vibration, the purpose, the reason for what he was trying to express. And then for him, the melody came to him almost as a vision would come, but as an auditory vision would come. And that was one of his expressions. He was a multi-leveled artist, of course. But coming back to the theme, therefore, the expression of art ought to be a pure expression of vibration. So as I was saying in here, what I generally do in my painting is the title of the book is Meditation Born Art. And so usually the idea of a painting comes in meditation, if not the original seed of the painting, at least the way of expressing the painting comes in meditation. And often it does not come as a mental concept. I'll show one here to illustrate that. Yes, this one. This is a very early painting of mine, and it's called Shasta is Born. Mount Shasta is a mountain, a volcanic mountain in Northern California. The way this came about, and this is to illustrate kind of the creative process for me. I was meditating one morning, and I was feeling the energy very strongly in the navel chakra. Now, the navel chakra has in some cases, a very powerful, fiery element to it. Master called that the center of fiery self-control. And so that image of a fiery energy and the feeling of that energy was there in meditation. And I simply was meditating. And then the thought later on in that meditation came, I wonder if you can take that energy and express it in a painting. And that's when the mind began to kick in, because up until that time, there was no thought about uh, trying to define this energy. I was just feeling it. But when the thought came of doing a painting, then I had to translate the feeling that I was feeling inside into, in my case, a visual form. What Swamiji did so often in his music is he had a feeling, a vibration, and then he wanted to express that in a melody, and then the melody would come to him. But the feeling comes first. And good art should have the feeling and the vibration come before the mental concept. Obviously, not all art does that. Also, the good art should have, as much as possible, the lack of ego in it, so that you're just trying purely to express a thought or an idea or a vibration, and you're not trying to express something that says, look at me, look how I do it, look how I do it, look how creative I am. I can be different than anybody else. Doesn't matter if it's ugly, it's different. And so pure art should strive to keep the ego out of it. And why is that important? Because for us as the spiritual path, as the evolution of consciousness, the ultimate goal is to dissolve completely the ego, the sense of separation from others, and ultimately the sense of separation from God. So coming back to the painting. So I was meditating, and this sense of fiery energy came to me. And then I began to think, now how could I express that in a painting? And then the thought came, the image came of, since Mount Shasta was a volcanic mountain, what about painting a painting of the birth of Mount Shasta? Because that was the energy of the lava coming up and exploding, expanding into the reaches of the sky. And so this painting has, first of all, the energy here is very bright and expansive, expressing that sense of color and sense of energy that I was feeling. But there's a form, for me, at least in my painting, if it's too ungrounded, if I just put colors down, as an abstract artist might have, it could have conveyed the fiery energy and the expansive quality. But for me, as I said, I'm trying to build a bridge between the physical world and the astral world, or the physical world and the world of energy. And so my art, I feel, needs to have a grounded element to it. So how do I ground that aspect? Well, you ground it with ground. So the earth, the mountain, is physical and it's solid, but it also has a flow of energy. And then the last thing I'll say about this is, here the lava has come down and created this stream. But the real reason for having this stream down is that represents the spine. It represents the astral energy. And so the astral energy, for the viewer, you look and you see the energy, and then you see this lighter part here, and you follow this stream up, and it's a simulation of the astral energy rising in the Sushumna and coming into the expansion. And so that's what I mean about, now the concepts of that are all basic concepts from our spiritual path. They're the teachings of Master, they're the teachings of this line of great yogis, and they're the central teachings of yoga, that the purpose, the methodology by which we really expand our consciousness is we take the energy which goes out into creation and gets involved, and because creation is such a tiny, tiny part of God's consciousness, if our energy is locked up in the physical world, it is almost by definition, it is contracted and it's small. What we're trying to do in meditation is to withdraw that energy into the spine. And when that life force is withdrawn into the spine, we bring it up to the spiritual eye, which that energy of the spiritual eye is represented there. And from the spiritual eye, if the ultimate goal of meditation is to bring all of our life force up, bring it up to it, bring it up to the spiritual eye, and then out of the body. If we can bring our life force out of the body, then the ego, which is tied to the body, dissolves, and we expand into samadhi. And so the idea behind art, and especially Ananda art, now it doesn't always have to depict exactly this element or that element. There needs to be creativity. There needs to be many, many kinds of expression of creativity. But it should somehow be grounded and be expressive of these spiritual qualities and spiritual teachings. But as I say, art is different from words. So I can describe this process of meditation and the withdrawal of the life force from, as Master said, the searchlights of the consciousness go out. We have to turn those searchlights in. We can describe that verbally, but describing it verbally keeps it at a certain relatively contracted level. The real goal of all these teachings is not to give us a lot of wonderful knowledge that makes us seem like, oh, how smart that person is. They're meant to give us a means by which we can actually experience these truths. And so art, if done, I would say Ananda art, certainly my Ananda art, is meant in order to help that process along, or to be an expression of that, to be an expression of that attunement with the guru and trying to express that. Now, sometimes that's done more literally, and sometimes it's done less literally. I'll show a couple of other paintings. The first section in this book is called the Guru-Disciple Relationship. And this was one of the very early paintings. It hung in my office at Ananda Village for many, many years. But this has an interesting story to it. I wanted to paint, first of all, the painting has some of the elements of Master's teachings in it. Master said that there are certain areas that are sacred to the yogi. Mountains are sacred because they represent uplifted consciousness and inspiration. The ocean is sacred, and he said particularly the horizon line of the ocean, at the horizon line between the water and the air, right at that horizon line, represents the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the dividing line in between is the superconsciousness. So the horizon line in the ocean is representative and vibrationally puts us in tune with superconsciousness. That's why many, many yogis are associated with the ocean, and they meditate on the horizon line. So this painting started out as a painting with Master looking at the horizon. Now, generally speaking, my paintings are not portraits for two reasons. The primary reason is I'm not a good enough artist to do a good portrait. A portrait is a particular kind of skill set, and I'm working at it. I have done some that work okay, but also a portrait creates a communication between the face of the person you're looking at and the viewer. And so it's kind of contained. Whereas this is meant for us to be behind Master. Our viewpoint is from behind Master, and we're emulating what Master is looking at. So the viewer here is Master is helping us look past him out into the horizon. And so that was basically the painting. I wanted to paint Master looking at the horizon with the waves, and he was calmly standing there in spite of the big waves crashing and all of that. And so I finished that painting, and then I set it down, but something kept nagging at me, because painting needs, at least for me, needs to be intuitive. And when Swami heard that I started painting, he said, "Good, you're too mental, and painting will help you develop your intuitive nature." And so this was one of the aspects of that. I thought I'd finished the painting, but something intuitively nagged at me and said, "It's not done yet. It's not done yet." It isn't meant just to show Master looking out at the horizon, or kind of without stating us being shown by Master what we should be looking at. It's meant to depict the guru-disciple relationship. And so intuitively, all of a sudden, about 2 weeks after the painting was done, it came to my mind, no, you need Swami in there. And so I put Swami in there because Swami's life was defined by his discipleship to Master. And so when I want to, generally speaking, depict something showing discipleship, generally speaking, it's Master and Swami, because that relationship of discipleship was very pure. And so, as I've been saying, art is meant to be an expression of consciousness. And when it's done well, when it's done as artistically as you can do it, then it should have a communication with the viewer, or the viewer too, not necessarily even on an intellectual level. I doubt that any viewer looking at this would go through that intellectual process. Oh, it's Yogananda standing there. He's looking at the horizon like, oh, there's a disciple. You aren't thinking that way. It's just an image, but it awakens in you those feelings, those vibrations, almost on a subliminal level. And so that subliminal communication is very, I would say, not even important in art, it's central to art, that there be communication of some concept that goes beyond the verbal aspect of it. And writing, of course, is an art too. But as I said here, writing reaches the mind first, whereas the more visual arts or music reach the other nature first. But there are many, many aspects to art. And throughout the book here, I have many paintings that don't have any image of a person in them. And I'm trying to find another one here. Okay, this one. I have a number of paintings that are somewhat similar to this. This is a painting of the energy of the spine. But how do you translate the energy of the spine into some sort of a visual concept? Well, here you have the energy contained by the spinal column, but the energy is going up a channel here and into the light, which is, as I was explaining earlier, a depiction of the process of meditation. And so there will be a number of paintings for me where that is the primary theme. And of course, then you get into different ways of expressing it and different creativity. And I think I'll show two more if I've got them. Oh yeah, this is partly a particular painting that has, let's face it, not much to do with the guru-disciple relationship or any of that. But Darshan and Devi and I went last year, was it last year? 2 years ago, to Amsterdam. And while we were there, we went to the Rijksmuseum. And Darshan grew up in Amsterdam, and he had been going to the Rijksmuseum since he was a little boy. And so at one point, it has wonderful paintings in it. I mean, by great, great artists, Rembrandt and dozens of, I don't know dozens, but a lot of paintings by Rembrandt and great art in it. But he took us to this relatively small painting that he said he was always drawn to as a boy. And it was simply a painting of a windmill with a kind of typically grayish, bluish Dutch vibration to it. And so, probably politically incorrect, huh? Okay, anyway, so having seen that, I thought, oh, it'd be nice. And I started out painting this for Darshan. And as you can see, it's got a gray and blue. But because windmills depend on wind, I wanted the clouds to be expressing a lot of energy with the expression of wind. And so I made the clouds very energetic and kind of wild. Well, my son, who is very energetic and a little bit wild, our son, when he saw this, it was the only painting I've ever done that he saw, and he said, "Could I have that?" So how could I refuse? So Darshan has a copy, and our son has the original. But here again, vibrationally, imagine the difference of the vibration of this painting if the windmill itself had been painted black. Wouldn't that change the whole energy of it? It would bring it down. But the fact that there's energy here, it gets lighter and lighter as you go up, and the windmill being vertical visual energy, you look at that, you look at the bright color of the windmill, and it helps the eye and therefore the consciousness to rise. And so I'll just conclude by saying, as we said, this book, for those of you who would like it, will be available next week. But I'll just conclude by saying that the purpose of our lives, and especially the purpose of the lives of those of us who are disciples of this path and who want to serve Master, serve these gurus, the main thing that our service involves is channeling their vibration, channeling their consciousness. And that should be a part of everything that we do. You know, it doesn't have to be some expanded philosophical concept. It can be cooking a wonderful meal. Master loved to cook. And so cooking is an expression of nonverbal communication. You know, you don't describe the meal as much as you taste it. And if a meal is done correctly, it is an art form. And it's got love, it's got vibration, it's got everything in it. But the point is that everything that we do, we should try to be channels to be able to convey something of these great teachings that we've been given. We're spiritually, all of us were multi-millionaires spiritually, because these teachings are so rich and so powerful. And when you have wealth, it is your duty to also take that wealth and help others with it. And so we have spiritual wealth, and it is part of our responsibility, but set aside responsibility and let's just make it selfish. It is part of our avenue of growth to share what we've been given. And in the sharing, we expand what we have been given, and we expand our consciousness until ultimately our consciousness becomes as expanded as the great masters who have inspired us. God bless you.